So sorry for for the muted. Let me start again from the beginning. Um, okay, I was saying that the goal for today is in the first hour we'll try to rebuild on with React actually the same web page that you worked on the lab on last Friday. Okay, actually this result for which we already have the HTML code. Okay, so last Friday you started from a mock-up of the screen and then you recreated that into some HTML text with nesting and so on. So our goal would be today, in the first hour, to recreate practically the same thing, but inside React this time. Okay, so by using React components. It would be easy because actually we already have the HTML nesting, but of course we don't want just to have one component that will render or create this HTML. We try to think about how to create something that could be generated automatically starting from starting data. I say that could be generated because right now we don't have a connection to database yet, so the content that we are creating will be static, okay? Like here it says a static React page, okay? In the sense that the content of the page will always be the same. We can create it from fake data, basically, and at the same time, all the buttons don't do anything yet. Okay, we'll learn later on. First, how to make the button working, and this will be the second hour for today. And in a couple of weeks, also how to interact with the server. Okay, to get real data and to operate with the API on the server that we built 2 weeks ago. Okay, so we're going to put the pieces together. But for today, we are just um, going with that. And the first thought is that an HTML page doesn't have a real structure. Okay, it has a set of tags. We have you designed, for example, a section for the header, and then there's a main section and some titles at the top, and a big table at the bottom. But this was just basically in our mind. We took the mockup and we broke it down into parts that were then implemented into HTML. Mm. In React, we can do better. So we can try and structure the page into a set of components. Okay, actually, so giving different parts of the page different responsibilities, basically. Okay, and so we know that the application starts from always a component called app. Mm. And we then want to break it down into several other components that we can decide. We can decide the tree and the name of these components. Okay, so actually what we can do is to start about the application component tree. So we know that it all starts with app. Okay, app will generate the full page, the full application, and then we need to decide which components. So we have at least one first line, so this title. Let me break it down like this, side by side. Okay, so the idea is, let me also make it larger for you. Uh, we could have the application that has a first block that could be a title or main header, okay, or let's call it the header, and finally a footer, which is below here with the copyright notice. Okay, and after that we could have a section describing the question. Okay, and then the table with the answers to that questions. Okay, these are logical sections of the page that we can make it, they correspond to the actual components of the application. Okay, and also at this level we can have some discussion about okay, all of these many of these components need to receive some information. Okay, so imagine the question component would be responsible for this part of the page. So it requires the ID of the question, requires the author of the question, and the text of the question itself. So actually this component we needs at least to have the ID, the author, and maybe the text of the question. Let's say make it easy to say that it needs a question object. Okay, so it can be done like by receiving a props dot question, and then we receive the full object from which it could extract all the information. Let's thinking about the object that we used in the last weeks. Okay, the answers component. What does the answers component need? Okay, the answers component needs actually all the information about the list of answers. So it will be a list, a props, a property, that make me call the answers in the plural form, which will be the list of answers. List in the sense, of course, of a JavaScript array. Okay, so where do this information come from? Okay, from the data point of view, this information will come from the property. So when we use we define the question object, the question component, we assume that we have this property as an input, and this property can only come from the father component. So app will need to have this information and pass it down when it calls the components. So app really needs to have all this information and pass all the information about the question to question object, and all the information about the list of answers to the answers object itself. Okay. Then we could think that the list of answers actually can be retrieved from the question object. Okay, remember that we have a question that has methods that say, okay, from a given question, you can extract the list of answers. So this could be a hint, if we want, just to try to analyze different solutions. Okay, question and answer could be directly children of app, or we could have some sort of a question block that will then generate as children question and answers, maybe. And this question block will receive just a question, and inside it will use some information about the question for it seems that my camera is stuck for some reason, but we don't need it. Some information about the question will be passed to the question component, and then this question block component would extract the list of answers and pass it down to the answers component. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that this component actually doesn't do anything visually, doesn't create anything in the web page, but is used for managing data. No? It's an intermediate component that groups other smaller components, and for example, has the responsibility of understanding how the data is structured, and it takes the responsibility out of the generic app component. Okay, so we may want to design components that do render some part of the page, like this one. Of course, it will create a table, and or components that just help in the logic of of generating the page. Okay, so maybe the first time we don't need all of this extra complexity, but it was just to say that we don't need just to follow the structure of the page, but also maybe the flow of the data. Okay, so let me put it back as it was before, as direct children of app. So we can start, but of course the answers component is the most complex one. Okay, and will not be a simple component, just one because we need to break it down into several pieces later on. But maybe first let's structure, no, the page, but by creating the header, the footer, and the question, and then we maybe spend some time in the answer when we are more familiar with the syntax. Okay, one of the questions in the chat was whether we can use the React Bootstrap module, and the answer is definitely yes. We are going to use that. It's a React module that will say, help us use the Bootstrap classes actually without actually using the class syntax. So whatever, just for comparison, whatever we had here where we loaded Bootstrap and put all these classes and row and column and so on, that was no, of course the mechanism of Bootstrap can be implemented in an easier way just by using this Bootstrap React Bootstrap class. So let's say, have a look. Okay, and this of course is a normal npm module that we can install into our project so that we can use Bootstrap component in an easier way, okay, directly. So they're creating React components that mimic, that copy Bootstrap classes. So basically, instead of let's say some example down there, okay, you see that there's a, for example, a button component with a capital B, okay, which takes, sorry, let me make it a bit larger. For example, a button component with a capital B, which is a component of this React Bootstrap library that will automatically create an HTML button and apply all the CSS, all the Bootstrap styles to it. Okay, so we'll have several components with a capital letter that no, already add all the classes for us. And we see that, for example, all the layout that is available with Bootstrap is implemented by a container component that takes the role of the div class equal to container fluid and so on, and row and call component that take the place of statement like div equal class call and class row and so on. Okay, so it will be all React components in this case. Again, we have in this React Bootstrap, we have the documentation that actually mimics the documentation of Bootstrap. So we see all the components for creating layout and all the other components. For example, for buttons, we have the documentation for creating them. So in Bootstrap, we can create a button by styling with classes. And here we have the button with a variant attribute that will apply directly the needed classes and so on. So it would, all of the Bootstrap layout will be implemented as React components. So for doing that, let's go to our application. I already opened, created an empty, where is that? An empty an empty React project as usual, and it's here called QA client. I just created an empty one, so we start from scratch. Okay, and we delete the current application so that we can start again with our new let's say project. So let's remove what we don't need. Okay, so as I said, if we want to use React Bootstrap, we need first to install it. So let me in the terminal stop it running and install React Bootstrap and Bootstrap. The Bootstrap class just contains the CSS files that are needed, and React Bootstrap actually contains the components, the React components. So I install this library in addition to the empty React project, and then I will restart the project once the downloading is over. Okay, npm run dev. Okay, so let's start. We say that the home page, the application, should contain these 4 modules, these 4 components. Okay, so there's a first syntax issue that we need to solve, in the sense that we can, for example, have one header component. We call it like that, a header. We could have a footer, the question, sorry, question component, and an answers plural component. Okay. Okay, why do we have this syntax error here with these red lines? The reason is that the function should return just one value, okay, a single value, a single component. And here we have 4 of them, and it's like returning 4 different numbers instead of 1. So we should, in a way, include this sequence of components into one container. So one idea could be, for example, to put a div around that, just to contain everything. Okay, so this div doesn't have any purpose for the page. It will just be a container because the React component, the function, must return just one element. And this element, sorry, one element tree. Last week we called the element tree. So one starting and one root element with some maybe a small tree of elements. But at the top you should only have one. Okay, so in this way this could work. The issue is that we are generating an extra div that we really don't need. Okay, this is just for putting everything together, basically for the reason of the syntax of the function return value. But at the end, it will actually really generate a div in the page. Of course, if a div doesn't have any class, any other attribute, it will do nothing, it will be invisible. Well, okay, but it's an extra layer. So React gives us a new type of HTML tag, which is called fragment. So not a React component, which is called fragment, which is very strange because it's just a tag with an empty content like this. Okay, so whenever we need to create a grouping of components and they need one root to be treated as one group, we could just use this syntax here. It's a special node called react.fragment, like it's written here, react.fragment, but it can be abbreviated, and usually is abbreviated like this with an empty tag. The idea is that we can, instead of div, we can just put a fragment that fulfills the role of containing, of creating the root for these components, but it doesn't create anything at the end. So we'll see it a lot. Imagine it as a sort of a brackets, okay, to contain a group of components and make them behave like one single component. Okay, Okay, so this will be a syntax that we are going to use um, very often, this kind of syntax. Okay, in this case it would have just generated a useless div, but in other cases we cannot generate any extra code we'll see later on in the table, for example. Okay, so this will be our initial application. If we can start to, if we want to try to save this file, of course it will not work because there's a lot of components that don't exist actually. So we get a not very nice empty page with a lot of errors like headers not defined and so on. So it doesn't compile. We should start defining one by one the different components. Okay. For example, we can define the component header, okay, function header, by returning, and let me maybe comment all the others. Let's put a comment around them, okay, so that we uncomment them one by one. This is like we saw last time. Just we define a function, and the function will return. Okay, we can copy now this header and div and nav and so on. We can use, for example, since we are using Bootstrap, you see that we are a container that contains a navigation bar. So we can copy that by using the React Bootstrap elements. It's a container, so we have we want to return a container from, so it doesn't find it right now, so we need to import, for example, import container from React Bootstrap. Okay, so now we will find it. We can have a container fluid, okay, that will contain the navigation bar. So again, the navigation bar is a component, so we need to play a bit with the documentation. For example, navbars. In React Bootstrap, we have a navbar component that can be customized and so on, with all the items, with all the links and so on, that we can add later. For the moment, let's just try to have it working. Okay, so it's a navbar called navbar, and again we need to import it from navbar. Sorry, always from React Bootstrap. Okay, and this navigation bar, which is the documentation, can contain sub elements, some information. So what do we need to put in there? Let me copy again. We need to have actually a title. So this can be done just by copying this. Then the navigation bar can be customized in many other ways. So if we save it, we should be able now to, okay, actually have this page, which is centered at this moment, that contains this navigation bar. Let's reload it to see if we don't have any extra errors. Okay, we see that the console doesn't have any error in this case. And we see that the React, like I mentioned last time, we have a React developer tools extension. If you installed it, I opened the console, the browser development console here, okay, and inside I installed the React developer tools, and I see the tree of components that we have created. So we have app that contains header, and header is our own component, and by itself we will contain container that includes navbar, and this is of course the implementation of navbar from the library. Okay, so here we can see the of course the actual structure of the HTML, the generated HTML with the divs and the navs, you see, or the component view, the React view of the same tree, of the same component tree. Okay, so depending on what we are searching for. Like we've said, we could put everything into app, or we can create another folder, like for example components, where we can move different components. So we can create, if we want to split it, we can call it header.jsx. We can move this function from app to avoid cluttering app.js with too much stuff. So we put it into header.jsx, and we then move. So let me drop all this CSS because we don't need it. So where was I? Okay, now header should be imported from components, and of course the importing of the bootstrap elements should be moved into header like this. So let me see if it works. So I just moved header, refactored it into a header.jsx inside the components folder. Okay, and we have now I also removed some of this CSS that were, let me remove it again. Okay, so we have it more a plain version. Okay, because the centering before was just due to the CSS that were in the demo version of the application, were not from my code. Okay, so this is the navigation bar. Of course, it doesn't have any colors, so yet we can apply them, but we see that at that point we can customize it by using Bootstrap attributes. Let's go on and implement some other parts. Okay, the easiest one are again, we can have the footer, and can do the same. So I have footer.jsx. Again, could be function. Let's make it easy. In this case, a function footer, and return. Let me copy the HTML. For the footer was a paragraph. Where do we have footer here? Maybe we just return a paragraph here. And from app, we can actually import this component from footer from components footer, like this. And now it reads, of course, why is that? Yeah. Oh, does it work? Header footer from components footer. Okay, okay, I forgot the exports in the header. Sorry, export default header, and the same for footer, because I was defining them. Okay, now we should okay, there you have the header and the footer. I'm missing the rest of the page, and of course I also missing a lot of graphics, but we can add it later. Now, question and the answer, okay? Like we said, so we come to the interesting part of the exercise. The question is a component that, of course, renders the top part of the page, but needs some information, okay? Some properties. So we can imagine. Let's start from the component. I create a new component called question.jsx and function question. And in this case, we need some properties, props, because this depends on the actual content of the question. And let's not forget to export it. Export default question. Okay. What are these properties? Now we can decide it. For example, props.question could be is an object, is a question object. Okay, that contains information about this specific question. So I need to have access also here to the definition of the question and answer object that we developed in the previous weeks, for example. So if I'm not wrong, in week 4, when we have the server, we had this file QA models. So I'm going back in time, and remember that we had this question and answer objects that were created. So we could reuse the same definition and import also this file, okay, inside our new React module. So we can do that. Maybe in my project, inside sources, I can create another folder. I can call it, for example, models instead of components, or where I can copy. Let me say if I can copy and paste here inside models this file. So we already have the definition of this, and we added that to our project. So we can access this kind of objects just by importing this. Okay, we also see that this needs the JS library, so we need to stop the application and remember to install also the JS, otherwise it didn't work. npm install the JS. So we are recreating inside the React application, and then run npm run dev. Inside the React application, we are recreating all the objects and the dependencies that are needed. So in this case, a question object, we know what it is because it's defined in QA models, and it will be the responsibility of who creates it. Who creates this object? Of course, is this object is received like props.question, and inside it can be used for rendering. Okay, let's make a very simple statement here. Return the title, for example. Okay. So return a paragraph with a question title. Now, later on, we'll make it more complete. For now, let's just see how we pass the data. We can write, of course, props.question here, because this would actually write the text props.question as a text here. Okay, so we need to use a JavaScript expression by saying, okay, we return a paragraph that contains the actual content of the text of the question, like that, for example. Okay, so we are returning a fragment of text, in this case a paragraph, then we make it more complex, by extracting some information from the argument of the function. And where does this argument come from? It comes from app. So we imagine that app should contain or should define what a question is. So it would be, for example, const question equal to new question object, QA question, and question should be imported from here, models, QA models, in our project, and it can have ID 1, text, how are you, the email of the author could be me at mail.com, I don't know, the user ID could be 24, and the date, I always forget whether the date should always be, okay, so the string because it's converted to a date internally, so today 2025 0401. Okay, so we created a static, just a constant with a new object, just a fake question. Okay, let's call it fake question to be more explicit. It's not a real question. For having a real question, I should have to query the database and extract the real question with a given ID. For now, we are just in a static version, so we create some constant object, and we need to pass this fake question to the question object, to the question component, as a property called question with a lowercase q. So props.question is received as a question, which is the name of the attribute, and the value of the attribute is fake question. Okay, so in this case, we see the application. This is undefined. Sorry, did I forget something? In QA models, what's wrong here? Answer, yeah, question. When you say this is undefined, it means that, okay. Okay, question. Okay, I have okay, sorry. I have a confusion because the name of question as a class and the name of question as a component are the same. So I'm actually, I need to rename this component if you don't mind, because I have the same name for both. So the component could be the question display, for example, and also the component should be named question display. Okay, and will be also the same display. Okay, let's try again. Question defined, not defined, of course, because I need to import it. No, import question display for question. In this case, I didn't rename the file, so it's like that. Okay. Okay, it takes some back and forth, but now we have, okay, so this is displayed by the what's wrong with you? Okay, we see that our application now contains contains three children, header, footer, and question display. And question display, you see that here in the inspector, so let me check if we can make it larger. Yes. I have a panel with list the properties, okay, that is this component is receiving. So right now I'm receiving one property of type question, and this is the structure, the value of the property that received. Okay, And so while the other one, you see that there are no properties I didn't pass any properties in the other ones. Okay, so now we are independent, so we can improve the question display component. For example, in the HTML here, we have the title and the number of number of question, the title, and so on, written in different lines, and we can just improve it as we want. Maybe just to make it easier, we can just call Q the question object itself. Okay, so that it would be easier to write something like a q.text or something like that to make it shorter. So it's just a function. What it counts is just what it returns. We can copy from the HTML. What did we do with the question? The question, we had a container. Sorry, this was the question. Yeah, like this. This part was the question itself. So we had a container block that had a row and different columns. So we can recreate it. Again, we can put a container from React Bootstrap, Fluid, and inside this container, I'm just copying the structure. I have 3 rows. And so, yeah, sorry, in the question, we have a row component from React Bootstrap that in the first case, it contains the question in the first half and the author in the second half. So again, do the question, I have a column. And the first column contains the question text. No, sorry, the question number. So it was, sorry, again, I'm copying from the wrong file. Okay, question number, and so on. And we want to make it as h2, for example. So use an h2 instead of a div, and we say question number q.id. And we have a second column, author by or asked by oops, I have VS Code which has been not responding. So let me try to okay. So sorry, I didn't it was stuck for a moment. And the second point is okay. I'm sorry, I am having some issues with this computer. Okay, okay, it seems unstuck. Now let's try to run it again. So Visual Studio Code, come on. Okay. Sorry, we lost a couple of minutes, but I hope it's no, it's not working very well yet. Okay, so I was trying to say, okay, to check this part as by, and it crashed on me again. I'm starting to hate it. Okay, so as by, and the name would be q.email, for example. So let's start to do this. So we need to go again to week 0506, go to QA client and start it. Okay, now I should be able to see export unexpected token. So there's a compilation issue here. What are you? Sorry, there's a syntax error somewhere. With some, yeah, okay, there's something here in line. Okay, there's some extra. Sorry. Okay, can reload it now. Let's try to restart it. Okay, so this is running. I reload the page. I think I should. There's probably the old version still running somewhere in the same port. Yeah, because the HTML is there. Okay. So something needs to be fixed, but oh, okay. So let's enable the component again. and questions display is sort of blocking. So let's see. Sorry. Okay, this is working. If I just had, for example, have this. I'm refreshing. What's wrong here? Because 1 second ago, q.id was defined. Wait. Okay, so stupid me. I forgot to import the call component, and I don't know what it was picking up instead of giving an error. Okay, so okay. Okay, now we have the different components are here, row and column. Now we need later to fix the layout and so on. Okay, but I will do that in the break so that we don't lose time with graphical issues. And after that, so for example, that we had another row with a question: is JavaScript better than Python? And we can do the same again. Okay, so now, sorry, now it is running /row, another row with a single column in this case, with a question text. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, and this was easy some way. Sorry, it was not easy to get it running because of stupid errors. But okay, now we have the component here. The layout is not okay because I forgot some boilerplate in Redbooks that in app. I will add it later. But so this is an example for this question display of a simple component actually that only takes some information and renders it in the page. Okay. The other component, which is the more interesting one, is answers. Okay, because it's not just a single component, but it is structured because it doesn't display just one answer, but a list of objects. So, for example, we should create a table with many rows. So answers actually creates the table, but every row it can be created by, for example, we will call it answers display. We change the name and question display. We can create a sort of an answer row as a single row of answers. Okay, so we split the responsibility for displaying the table of answers into some component that will create the framework, the main table, plus a component that will create a single row of text by navigating actually the array of possible answers. If I, for example, go here in the answers display, I can create a new file, answers.jsx, and I need to create a function. I say answer display with some properties, and this property will be we know that we receive props.answers, which will be in this case fake answers, but the component doesn't know if the answers are fake or not. The component actually um, renders its parameters, its arguments, without caring about whether they are good data or fake data. What does this component do? Basically return so for example the answers, let's save them answers from props.answer to have them ready, props.answers in a short. So it will return a table basically, okay? We can use a table, or we can use a React Bootstrap table. So for example, we have tables. We see that in React Bootstrap we have a component which is called table with the capital T. Okay, it can be imported from React Bootstrap. Return table, and we can import table from, sorry, table with the, like that, from React like this. I lost the auto-completion for some reason. Okay, and these tables contains some header and row and body, row and so on. Okay, so then we are using the normal table tags inside of a table with a capital T, so the Bootstrap table component. Okay, so it could be like we have okay, this we can copy it easier from the HTML. Where do we have it? It's here. The content of the heading of the table is very easy. It doesn't change, it's just a header. Okay, so we can just steal it directly, and the first row can be just like this. Okay, we can fix it, but and let's see if it works. So if let me uncomment it from the app and see what we are creating. Again, yes, I need to, in the break, I need to restart this computer because it's creating problems. Answers display is, I need to import it. I should receive errors, but import answers display from components answers display, like this. Components answers display, and in answer I forgot to export default answers display. No, sorry, now the completion is just answer without the S. Okay. Okay, so we have the header of the table here, which is the static text. And the point where I wanted to get is that after the table, so in answers display, after the table, we need to have many other rows, so inside the body, t-body, we have many rows, one per each answer. So answer is a list, we may have many lists. So how can we iterate? We are inside the return statement of a single, let's say, expression, okay? And here we must generate many tr elements, one for the first answer, one for the second answer, and so on, inside the same body. In a dynamic way, we don't know how many answers we have. So this actually means that this part of the page can be generated automatically, no? So by some JavaScript code that will generate dynamically a list of components. And the list of components can be generated, for example, by navigating the answer, which is a list, with a map statement, for example. Okay? So we are taking a list of answer objects, and we are mapping each object into a component. Like, for example, the answer A, sorry, a single answer will be mapped, will be substituted by a component that we can call answer row. That's a component that will display a single row with a parameter that tells it which row to display. Answer, for example, equal to A. Okay, so I am saying that this table at this point contains a variable number of answers and a row of rows. Each row is generated by an extra function, an extra component. So answer display is not a terminal component, it needs some helper components below it. In this case, it's called answer row. And answer row will be another function that we don't need to export. Maybe it can be in the same file. It's only needed here. Function answer row, for example, props. And basically what it will do, it will generate a single row. So we return something like a tr, a table row. Return, so armies, return. And this row will contain some information about the answers. So for example, the data for the first column was the date. So the date is taken from the, sorry, we have the answer, const. Let's take it out, prop.answer. It could be a.date, for example, and so on. And the second column was the text. So we have another cell, a.text, and so on. Okay? So this is the logic. The logic is that, sorry, in a curly brace. So we have to generate, to include in a component a list of objects a list of components that is created from some list of objects. List of objects is the list of answers, and we take each one of them and replace. So actually inside these braces, we have a list of components. This list of components then will generate each one. So before running this, of course, we will need to create the list of components, the so-called answers that must be generated. So right now, so let me see what error I'm getting here. What's wrong with you? Answer row, there's something with the parentheses probably. So answer map, t-body, answer row. Sorry, let me check just the nesting of the parentheses. Okay, I have an extra closing parenthesis. Okay, like this. Okay. So right now we are generating something empty because with these answers list is empty. So we'll not generate anything. It should, because this map will create an empty block. We should work from up for creating again some fake answers. Could be an empty list, and from this empty list we can add, for example, dot push a new answer, and so of course we can import answer from here with the arguments, and then maybe a second one, okay, for example. And then we need to put some parameters. Let me check the parameters. So the ID, no, ID text email user ID date. ID text email user ID date. ID would be maybe 10. Text email text would be okay. 11 would be it crashes. And user ID would be A, and maybe another would be okay. And then maybe we need some user ID, so text email, user ID and date. Text email, user ID, and the date. We can say one is for today and the other one for yesterday. So 2025-04-01, and the other could be 2025-03-31. Okay. And so in this case, I can pass an argument answers from this fake answer. So I'm building some stupid answers, put them into a list, because the props.answers for the answer display should be a list of answers called answers with the plural form, and I'm calling the answers display component. The answers display component expect these answers and as a list, and they will transform the list into a list of components, and each component would render a single row of the table. Let's see how it's working, if it's working. I think there I still have an old version running. When everything crashed, it didn't kill the you see this is two times. And the console. Okay. Okay, there's an error here because I had in the display at the date. Let me remove the date for the moment because it needs a string and not an object. Okay. Okay, now it renders. I need to convert the date into a string, but I will do in a second. Just to show you that the text is displayed. And so let me run this again. So now we fix it. Hopefully I'll restart the computer and everything will go right. But what I see is that now I have a table. Let me pick the okay, you see that we have the answers display that contains many answer row components. So one single answer display that contains, in this case, two answer row components, and each of them, if you look at the answer display, has one property called answers that is a list here. And each answer row contains just one answer, singular, with one object of type answer, the first one, and the second one, they are different. So actually we divided a different component into different children, and each child is rendering a part of it. The last point I wanted to show you before the break, and then we'll set it up, is this error here. Each child in a list should have a unique key, which is a very, very common error and a very, very common mistake. What is it happen here? From the point of view of React, remember that React is creating the virtual DOM and then is trying to map the virtual DOM into the real DOM in the web page. Okay. In this case, I have a list of components, many components that look similar, answer row, and so on. And React should, if you have a list of many rows, okay, it's okay. It's not difficult. It can render them. The issue comes when the data change. So maybe we are adding a new row, or maybe we are deleting one, or we are changing one of them. So imagine you have first two rows, okay, here, and then later on, for some reason, the data changes, and now we have three rows. So how can React know whether the three rows are the two of the previous one plus one at the end, or plus one at the beginning, or are totally different from the previous ones? Okay, React, of course, it could check, it could control whether the content of the row is the same, the property of the row is the same when we change it, but it would be expensive. So for efficiency reason, okay, if React knows that we are adding one row at the end, it will only update the DOM in that part. If React knows that we only are modifying the data of one row, it will not modify the HTML, the DOM corresponding to the other rows. Okay, so that's why whenever we render a list, we have an extra, and this is explained at the end of the first presentation, called lists and keys. Whenever we render a list, when we are normally doing that with a map, so we are mapping something into a component, a list of components, and so on. Okay, whenever we render a list, we must add an extra attribute called key to each component, to each children that we are generating. So in our case, we just add one value key that can uniquely identify the data that we are trying to display there. It should be just a unique value, any value. It will not be displayed. It will be just used by React to understand whether we are recreating the same data, or we are creating or adding new data, or removing them. So for suppressing this warning and helping React in the performance of its rendering, the general rule is whenever we are a list of components, and this 90% of the cases comes out of a map operation, the component itself should have an extra property called key. So always remember, when you are creating a list, you must have the key, and the key should hold a value which is an identifier to the current data. So it will be a simple value, just a string or a number, because it must be easy and fast to compare, and should be related to the data. So in this case, for example, a good candidate is the ID of the answer. So React knows that this row will display the data corresponding to this ID. And if you are adding one row, it will see that the ID is different. So actually the algorithm for tree matching is helped a lot because it will just rely on the comparison of the keys, and it doesn't need to compare the actual properties. And this is so important that it comes out as a strong warning every time you are using React. Okay, so now I modified it, and you see that in the tree, on the component tree, we have two rows that are being identified by the key. Now I use the ID of the answer, which is a natural ID. If I add a new answer, no worries, it will create another row with another key, and so on. The key element is not part of the properties. So the answer object, the answer row object itself doesn't see this key, because actually the same information is already available in the ID if we want it. But the key actually is just a trick, a helper, whenever we are creating a loop, a map, a list, for helping us distinguish the elements. Okay, so for example, if we had to render the same component in a different order, maybe we are sorting in a different order the elements, and we can add this functionality later, sort by date or sort by author, for example, uh, then we will have the same components in a different order, and React will be very fast in rearranging the rows because it knows the keys, so it doesn't need to destroy the table and recreate a new one in the new order. Okay, but this only works if we remember to add the key. So just remember, when you see that when you create a map, always check. The console will have an error that will tell you like this: each child in a list should have a unique key property. Yeah, it's very easy to find and very easy to correct. Okay, so just be careful at every list. Okay, so these are apart from the issues that we had with Visual Studio today. Okay, is the basic way of creating these components, where we actually reason about. We said, okay, answer row is a single row, then maybe this answer display could have a header, create a header, and then an answer row. Then inside answer row we have the data and the actions to the buttons, so we still have to add them. Okay, uh, and maybe we can have a separate component, maybe. Could be useful to separate a component just for displaying the data and a component for displaying the buttons, and so on. So we can nest the component as we like, but just by delegating each component to a specific responsibility. So we can structure it a bit. And for each component, we always ask what are the properties. In this case, and the answer row only has one argument, which is the answer, a single answer. So in planning this, we should, and just coming back to the general goal of the exercise, break down the logical structure of the application into a set of components, decide how they are nested inside each other, and what are the properties that each component should receive from its father. So who is going to provide the argument, the property answer, to the component answer row? Its father is answer display. And who is going to what information does answer display need to render? The list of answers. And who is going to provide the list of answers to this component? Its father, which is app, and so on. So it's a very simple model. Components are nested inside each other, and each component can only receive information from its direct father, direct ascendant, that of course, and in turn should have this information in some way, should receive information this way. The flow of information is always top down, from up to the nesting components, to the inner components and so on. Okay, so and we'll see how this will change when the user can interact, but this is something that we can do after the break. So I will stop here this exercise. I will correct and fill it to make it look better looking in the meantime. But I think I need to restart my computer to have a better experience in the next hour. So if you are okay, we can reconnect back in 15 minutes for the break. So I will restart the computer. You can take a coffee, and see you later in 15 minutes, right? At 11:45.